to Alex the Orchadork. So if you're like me, you've probably felt a lot of the time like that introduction. You'll practice something for months and months and months and it feels like it didn't get any better. That can be really frustrating. So today we're going to be talking about practicing your practicing. It's going to be less about the actual playing and more about the mental game of practicing and learning the best and most efficient way to practice. So here are 10 ways to practice your practicing. 1. Set small goals. If you get to the end of your practice session but you can't really name a couple things that you actually accomplished, that's probably a sign that you're practicing the wrong way. So something you can do to help fix this problem is making sure that there's a couple things that you actually accomplished. One way that you can do this is by making a practice journal. This is just a notebook I use, and I use it for a practice journal. So before my practice session, I look through my pieces and exercises and find just a handful of things that I would like to fix today. And at the end of my practice session, I write down things that I actually accomplished. So for example, in one of my practice entries for the day, I said that on my sand piece I was working on, I got the first page intonation and I worked on the second page phrasing. These are all just small things in the grand scheme of a whole piece, but it's so much more effective than having your entire piece and trying to fix it all in one practice session. So if you can set small goals in your practice session, that's really going to help you make better progress because you're going to be more efficient about breaking down your piece and actually accomplishing the things that you need to fix in your piece. 2. Practice slowly. Don't focus on getting the piece sounding like a performance right away. That's one of the biggest faults I have in my practicing is I get a piece that I'm just so excited about and I want it to sound like the recordings that inspired me right away. I miss out on a lot of the technical corrections that I should be making because I'm just working on kind of sounding like I'm performing it. Making sure you practice slowly either with a metronome for rhythm or with a drone for intonation is really going to help you hear the little mistakes that you might not realize if you just rush and try to perform the piece. 3. Repeat small sections. So rather than choosing a big chunk like a whole page of your piece that you want to work on, focus on even just a measure, just working on one little section. There's going to be so many more things that you realize are needing improvement. Working on smaller bites, it's a lot easier to repeat things enough times to really solidify it in your brain so that you won't have to come back to it later. 4. Don't start at the same spot every time you practice. If you forget where you are in the middle of a performance, sometimes it feels like you don't know where to pick it back up. So if you work on starting at different spots, your brain will be able to go, oh, I can start at this place, rather than having to go all the way back to the beginning and start again. Oftentimes, we focus a lot on the first couple pages and then the last couple pages don't get as much attention. So starting at different spots every time you practice is going to really help make sure that you're distributing your practice time throughout the piece. 5. You want to make sure that you're not focusing on a bunch of different corrections at once. This is also something I'm really guilty of because you come home from your lesson or wherever instruction you're getting and you have so many corrections and you just feel overwhelmed and you want to have them all fixed at once. And so you'll play through a section and you'll be thinking about 4 or 5 different corrections. But it's really more efficient if you play through your section and then you only focus on intonation or you only focus on your tone. Just focus on one thing at a time. And once you repeat that enough times and solidify that correction, move on to the next thing. Your brain can only handle so much information at once, and so only focusing on one specific thing is going to be so much easier for your brain to recognize than trying to do a bunch of things at once. And so that's going to make your practice time much more efficient. 6. Make sure you're listening to recordings of professionals. Listening to a recording of the piece you're playing is really going to help show you how it should sound and what you want to sound like. Whether that means certain intonation that you need to fix or phrasing that you could choose, really anything in a recording that you can pick out to work on is going to be helpful. So one thing I like to do when I'm practicing is I'll listen to a recording of someone playing the piece I'm working on, and I'll watch either what bowing and fingering they do and see if I like that, or I'll listen to how they phrase it. You don't want to copy people, but listening to professionals really helps show you how you want your piece to sound. And so listening to little sections that you're working on is really going to help you pick out the things that you want to fix in your own playing. 7. When you are working on a section, Actually think in your head what you want to do differently. This sounds kind of like an obvious step, but when you think about it, it's one of the hardest things to do when you're practicing. When you play something and you hear that the intonation is bad, you think, oh, the intonation in that was bad. But are you actually thinking what about the intonation was wrong? For me, that's something that's really hard to do. I'll play something and just say to myself, oh wow, my intonation was terrible. But I don't actually think in my head and say to myself, oh, that note was too sharp and that note was too flat. You have to actually say these things in your head in order for your brain to recognize what to actually physically change. That addresses the problem where you play the same thing a bunch of times and it seems to not get better. If you are just repeating it, nothing's gonna get better. But if you're actually saying in your head what you want to fix the next time you play it, that's going to help you be able to actually do it the next time you play it. Now, number 8 kind of relates to number 7. Don't be afraid to mark up your music. Nobody really cares what your music looks like. It's not like when you perform a piece, everyone's going to be sitting there looking at your music that you've marked up. So get out a pencil when you practice, and when you find those things like, oh, that note was too sharp and that note was too flat, actually write that in your music. Write arrows, dynamic markings, little reminders, anything that's going to help you remember the next time you play that to make that change. A good rule of thumb I was always taught is if you do something wrong 3 times, that's when you should write a reminder in your music. Because if you just do it once or twice, it might have just been a mistake. But if you do it more than 3 times, that's usually a sign that it's something that you have ingrained wrong. And so if you write a reminder in your music, you're going to see that next time and actually remember to fix that instead of doing the same thing again. Number 9 is probably one of the most uncomfortable steps, but it's also one of the most helpful. And that's to record yourself when you're practicing. Whenever I would have to record things for auditions, it would just kill me to have to listen to them over again because it shows you how you actually sound and that makes you kind of self-conscious. If you get used to recording yourself and listening to recordings of your playing, it's going to be a lot less disappointing when you have to record things for auditions. Also, when you record your practicing, you'll be able to listen and find out mistakes that you made and things that you can fix that you might not have realized when you were playing it. This has been a challenge for me recently because I've started a challenge called the 100-Day Practice Challenge. And so you can see that on my Instagram. And it's where every single day you post a video of something you practiced that day. And so not only is it a good way to get you to think about what you're working on every day, but also it's been forcing me to actually listen to my recordings every single day when I practice. It's been really helpful because it's pointed out things to me that I didn't realize were there, and so it's helped me practice to an even deeper level because I'm working on things that I didn't even originally hear. Now, after all those tips, I come to number 10, which is patience. I know as a musician, it's really easy to get caught up in YouTube videos of amazing players or the people around you in orchestra that you feel like you're not as good as. And it's really easy to get really impatient and just want to immediately be a professional level. But we have to remember that part of the fun of being a musician is the process of getting better at a piece. Even if it's just one little tiny note in your piece, it's just such a good feeling to know that you've worked on that and that it's gotten better. Even though it can be tedious and it might be disappointing because it points out that you still have a long way to go on your piece, it really pays off in the end because it forces you to not skip over things and to really focus on details, which is what's going to make your piece sound amazing in the end. And remember to not compare yourself to the people around you. You should only compare yourself to yourself. That's the only way that you're going to be able to improve your practicing and also be fulfilled in your journey as a musician, and not worrying about who's better than you, who's worse than you, because thinking about all that stuff really is just going to make you feel worse and not want to practice. So you should just focus on your own practice and just remember that every little thing you fix is an accomplishment and you should feel proud of that. So I hope you enjoyed those 10 tips on practicing your practice. Can you guys comment something that you're working on right now? Whether that's which piece you're working on, which specific technique you're working on. Right now, I'm working on developing my ear so that I can more accurately hear my intonation. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. Bye! 1. Oops. Ugh. Wow. You see that arrow? Do you see how good that looks? I'm a natural.